The siege has ended. 014.M31. Somewhere above, Rogal Dorn is carrying what is left of the Emperor toward a device that was never supposed to hold him. Below, a custodian named Diocletian Coros, Prefect of the Legio Custodes, walks toward the golden throne. His kindred, stripped down to cloaks and black helms, step aside for him. The text from Aaron Dembski-Bowden's short story, The Carrion Lord of the Imperium, contained in the Era of Ruin anthology, published by Black Library in 2025, is specific. Diocletian approaches the golden throne, such as it is, and his kindred, naked but for their cloaks, loincloths, and black helms, move aside in his honor, such as it is. Elsewhere in the same story, Diocletian speaks this line: "I watched the death of my king's dreams, and then the death of my king. Not the wounding, not the injury, the death." Era of Ruin is the final entry in the Siege of Terra series, the Black Library run that began in 2019 and concluded in 2025. The Carrion Lord of the Imperium arrived in it carrying more institutional weight than anything else in the collection, because, in a named character's own words, using language that refuses to clean up what it is describing, it puts onto the page what the Custodes have understood since the moment Rogal Dorn placed the Emperor's body onto that machine. The Primarchs were the project that broke. The Custodes are the project that didn't. The grief in that story isn't simple mourning. It's the grief of an institution that predicted the failure, said so before it happened, and has been paying the accounting ever since. The Adeptus Custodes predate the Primarchs. This is the foundational fact. Canonically described as, by many accounts, the Emperor's true firstborn, prefiguring even the gene-crafted Thunder Warriors, the Custodians were the first genetically and psychologically altered warriors in the Emperor's armies, appearing from the earliest records of the Unification Wars as massive figures in golden plate bearing powered spears. Where Thunder Warriors were an earlier prototype, and Space Marines were a mass-produced Legion instrument, the Custodes occupied an entirely different category. The 8th edition Codex is explicit. The process required to produce a Custodian is far more refined than the Astartes method. They weren't built to be a conquering army. The Lexicanum confirms that role was to be filled by the latter Astartes armies. They were built to be close. The Emperor's own language, preserved in Codex sources, draws the distinction in full. Each one of the 10,000 represents genetic lore acquired over many lifetimes. Each one of you is unique, a work of art never to be repeated. I am miserly with your lives, where I would spend so many others without a thought. He would spend other lives without a thought. His custodians he wouldn't. This isn't sentiment, it's constitutional. The Custodes answer to the Emperor and the Emperor alone, confirmed across the Lexicanum and Codex sources, and their authority within the Imperial Palace places Space Marines and Inquisitors at their feet. The Captain General holds a seat among the High Lords of Terra. 17 have served since the Great Crusade. Most died in battle. 3 simply vanished, including Constantine Valdor himself, whose disappearance after the heresy remains one of the most consequential unresolved threads in current canon. In Master of Mankind, ADB's 2016 novel, Tribune Ra Endymion serves as the primary viewpoint character for the war in the webway. The Emperor showed Ra visions. He held private conversations with him in the deep chambers beneath the Imperial Palace, asking Ra whether he speaks aloud, testing the quality of the relationship in real time. The Emperor and his custodians had an exchange that could sustain that kind of directness. That wasn't hierarchy performing warmth. It was something considerably more intimate. The Carrion Lord of the Imperium adds a specific structural fact. The Lexicanum already confirmed that 300 custodians serve as the emperor's companions, never leaving his side. The story establishes that this inner tier was specifically consulted before major undertakings, including, critically, the Primarch project. Those 300 companions advised against it. The emperor built the Primarchs anyway.
18 of them, 20 including the 2 lost in the scattering.
9 of 20 turned traitor. The war those 9 started ended with the emperor on the throne. Those 300 custodians were right. The Great Crusade required an instrument the Custodes couldn't be. 10,000 warriors, each irreplaceable, each individually crafted. They couldn't conquer a galaxy. The math was impossible. A campaign across millions of inhabited worlds demanded forces deployable simultaneously on hundreds of fronts. The Space Marine legions numbered hundreds of thousands by the height of the Crusade. When the Emperor chose his instrument of galactic conquest, he chose the Primarchs and their legions. He returned to Terra. He brought his custodians. He handed the war to his second project. The Custodes weren't formally diminished. They guarded the Emperor, always their stated purpose, while the Primarchs led armies across the stars.
But the operational center of the Imperium's ambition had shifted. The Emperor's closest companions watched from the Imperial Palace, while demigods prosecuted the conquest the Emperor himself had stepped back from. During this period, the Emperor turned to what he considered his most consequential work, the Imperial Webway project. The Golden Throne, built to his specifications by the Mechanicum using archaeotech recovered from the Dark Age of technology, functioned as the psychic anchor for a portal into the labyrinth dimension of the webway. The plan was direct: give humanity access to the Eldar's transit network, eliminate dependence on warp travel, remove the need for navigators and astropaths, and open a future where the species could move across the galaxy without exposing itself to the Immaterium's predations. The Custodes and the Sisters of Silence fought in the webway for years, as the Emperor maintained the anchor above. Ra Endymian's perspective in Master of Mankind covers this campaign directly.
The Golden Throne was a door. The Emperor intended to walk through it when the work was complete. Magnus the Red closed it permanently. In late N30, Magnus tore an unauthorized psychic breach through the webway into the Imperial Palace. His intention was to warn the Emperor about Horus. The result was the destruction of the psychic barriers that had taken years to construct, the flooding of the Imperial Webway extension with demonic entities, and the irreparable loss of archaeotech infrastructure that couldn't be replaced. The Emperor was forced to maintain his position on the throne to hold the rupture closed. The door became a dam. The Custodes in the webway fought to contain the damage for years.
The Lexicanum, drawing directly from Master of Mankind,
records the cost. Around 5 years into the war within the webway, they had been reduced to around 1,000. The 10,000 lost 9,000 warriors, irreplaceable, individually crafted, emperor-made, in a war the broader Imperium never acknowledged. A war made necessary by the cascading consequences of a Primarch acting beyond his authority, in a galaxy the Primarch project had promised to hold together. Then the siege. Then Malcador sat on the throne. The first Lord of Terra, the greatest mortal psyker in human history, took the Emperor's position on the device to allow the Emperor to face Horus on the vengeful spirit. The throne destroyed him.
The confirmed line from The End and the Death, Volume 1, reads, "Behold the greatest sacrifice of our age. Malcador, the Sigillite, is no more. Henceforth he shall always and only ever be Malcador the hero." Rogal Dorn carried the Emperor back from the vengeful spirit and placed him where Malcador had been. The device that had been designed as a door, that had become a dam, became a reliquary. The most ambitious project in human history was permanently repurposed into something its designers wouldn't have recognized.
The Lexicanum's entry on the Custodes' post-heresy state records the institutional response. They changed the color of their cloaks from red to black to symbolize the darkness that had fallen over their order. To further mark their failure, many, such as those in the Heteron Guard, stopped wearing all but their black helms, capes, and loincloths. When Diocletian approaches the throne in the Carrion Lord of the Imperium, the kindred who step aside are already in those black helms and loincloths. They have already changed. That single visual detail in the confirmed excerpt carries the full weight of what the Lexicanum describes. The Custodes know what the throne actually is. They built the project, fought to protect it, watched it destroyed, and have stood vigil in front of the repurposed device for 10,000 years since. The Lexicanum confirms they are keepers of his many secrets, operating beyond standard imperial law, with exclusive authority over who may approach the Emperor's physical form. Nothing reaches the throne room without their permission. This isn't the position of men waiting for their father to wake. It's an institution managing the consequences of a failure they warned against, sustaining a machine that was never designed for this purpose, keeping that knowledge away from the 40 billion worlds that would come apart under its weight. Every Primarch who walks through the Imperial Palace carries this context with him, whether or not he knows it. The Custodes know it. They have known it since the day Dorn made the last delivery. The two confirmed direct quotes from the Carrion Lord of the Imperium need to be read against each other. The first, Diocletian arriving at the throne, his kindred in black helms already standing aside, the narrative calling what he walks toward the golden throne, such as it is. Not the device in its glory, not the device in visible decay. The device described with the exact qualifier an honest observer would reach for after 10,000 years of watching it perform a function it was never built to perform. The second, I watched the death of my king's dreams, and then the death of my king. Diocletian witnessed both ends of the same sequence. The dreams died when Magnus breached the webway extension. The king died on the deck of the vengeful spirit and was placed on the device the novel refuses to call by its formal name without qualification. Diocletian was present from the late Great Crusade through the heresy's end. He advised against the project that started the chain. The story also takes a position on a long-standing in-universe question, whether the Primarchs are meaningfully the Emperor's sons. Diocletian comes down clearly on one side of it. The Emperor's actual investment, the irreplaceable genetic craft applied to individuals rather than mass production, was in the Custodes. The Primarchs were a different process, one that multiple volumes of the Siege of Terra series had been building toward acknowledging as something not entirely of the Emperor's sole design. Diocletian, present for the original consultation that preceded the project, rejects the sonship claim in the same story where he stands at the device the project produced and refuses to call it by its official name. And separately from his position on the project in the abstract, the story establishes that Diocletian holds specific contempt for Guilliman, not as a personal dislike of a commander, but as an institutional assessment.
The Lord Commander of the Imperium represents, to Diocletian, the full arc of the thing that broke the throne, a survivor wearing the Emperor's authority in an Imperium sustained by 10,000 years of custodian labor. The story frames the response to all of this with precision. The Custodes want to withdraw from it, from the Imperium's new theocratic shape,
from the knowledge that the next 10,000 years will be a deterioration they can already see the shape of, from Guilliman's functional optimism about rebuilding something they believe was already over when the last scorched body was pulled from the throne room. They can't leave. Their devotion to the Emperor is the one constraint that keeps them at their post. So they find meaning in small things, in the ceremonial rites they invented for their dead at the dawn of the Imperium, in the questions that only matter now that everything is gone. That isn't simple grief.
That is an institution processing what it knows while maintaining the discipline that keeps the knowledge contained. The community instinct after reading Era of Ruin is to reach for the Terminus Decree as the mechanism of Custodes' authority over the Primarchs. The instinct is understandable. The canon corrects it in a direction that proves the point differently. The Terminus Decree's full contents were confirmed in the 10th edition Grey Knight's Codex, released in 2024. The terms are specific. The Emperor may not leave the Golden Throne, whether returned to life, reborn, or ascended as a warp entity. The prohibition is absolute. Its enforcement mechanism is the Grey Knights, not the Custodes. The Codex reasoning follows directly from the Custodes' own nature. Their loyalty to the Emperor's person is so complete that if something presenting itself as the Emperor expressed a wish to leave the throne, the Custodes would be constitutionally incapable of denying that wish.
The Grey Knights were created specifically because the 10,000 were too loyal for the failsafe role. The most perfectly loyal warriors in human history couldn't be trusted with the final institutional document because their loyalty was the architectural problem. This isn't the decree granting Custodes authority over Primarchs, but it reveals the Custodes' actual institutional position. They hold supreme access to the Emperor's physical form, but not supreme authority over his fate. That authority was assigned to an organization built specifically because the Custodes' own devotion made them unfit to exercise it. The Custodes carry their own legal instrument, the Lex Magisterium Ultima, referenced in canon sources as granting them the privilege to ignore imperial law entirely. They operate beyond the Imperium standard framework. But the document governing the throne's ultimate fate is held by someone else. The Primarchs hold neither instrument. They don't access the throne room without Custodian permission. They don't carry the Emperor's final mandate. They carry Guilliman's interpretation of that mandate, and the Custodes know the difference between those two things. Roboute Guilliman returned during the Gathering Storm. He became Lord Commander of the Imperium, launched the Indomitus Crusade, and negotiated with Captain General Trajan Valorous the amendment to the Edict of Restraint that allowed Custodes to deploy more widely across the galaxy. That amendment was a deal. Guilliman needed it. Valorous agreed to terms that served both institutional interests. A named custodian, Tribune Maldavar Colquan, listed in the Lexicanum's known members of the M42 Adeptus Custodes, was assigned directly to the Lord Commander. The confirmed sourcing from Guy Haley's Dark Imperium, Godblight, establishes Colquan's brief in precise terms. He is tasked to both protect Guilliman and watch him. Protect and watch. The distinction between those two verbs isn't loose phrasing. It's the institutional relationship between the Custodes and the surviving Primarchs written directly into the operational assignment of a named character. In the same novel, Guilliman overrides Colquan's judgment on a boarding action. The Custodian objects. Guilliman proceeds anyway, much to the dismay of Colquan. A Primarch overriding a Custodian's recommendation in a context where the Custodian is specifically assigned to watch him. This is the friction of the Indomitus Crusade at the individual level. The Dark Imperium series shows Guilliman actively managing the dynamic. He tells a custodian that guarding the emperor requires remembering who the emperor guards in turn, a correction aimed at custodian dismissiveness toward ordinary humans. The Lord Commander of the Imperium feels the need to remind a member of the 10,000 why the mission exists.
That isn't the relationship of a superior officer and a contented subordinate. Guilliman's formal authority over the Custodes is limited by institutional design. He holds his title through functional consensus in an Imperium where the Emperor hasn't clearly communicated in 10,000 years. The Custodes have never been constitutionally obligated to treat Guilliman's assumption of authority as equivalent to the Emperor's actual mandate. They were present when the Emperor's actual plans were in operation. They know what those plans included and what they didn't. From Diocletian's vantage, and the vantage of every custodian who has maintained the throne since 014.M31, Guilliman is the senior surviving member of the project that cost the Emperor his body. He runs an Imperium in the Emperor's name. Colquhoun watches him. The crusade continues. In M42, Lion L. Johnson returned. The Lion, Son of the Forest by Mike Brooks, published in 2023, covers his reappearance. Whether the Custodes hold formal institutional awareness of his return is genuinely open. The Lexicanum does not resolve it, and the canon treats the Lion's re-entry into imperial affairs as regional and gradual. But Era of Ruin contributes a structural fact that reframes every Primarch return. The novel appears to establish something the setting had previously left implicit. The Primarchs aren't biologically immortal in the way the Custodes are. The Lion has been aging. His depiction in The Lion, Son of the Forest, shows observable physical change from his pre-heresy state. The Custodes don't age. The 8th edition Codex states this clearly. Diocletian Coros, who stood at the throne in 014.M31, will be present when the last of the Primarchs dies. The 10,000 won't merely outlast the failed project institutionally. They will outlast it biologically. The Lion returned after 10,000 years of absence. The Custodes maintained the throne for all 10,000 of those years.
Whatever the first Primarch experienced during his long sleep, the 10,000 stood their vigil, managed the machinery, replaced their dead, and kept the Astronomicon burning. His return does not change their position. It adds another face from the failed project to an M42 landscape that the Custodes have been managing without him. Vulcan's M42 status is unresolved in current canon. His nature as a perpetual, capable of resurrection confirmed across multiple sources, makes his eventual return plausible. The Beast Arises series confirmed him alive approximately 1,500 years post-heresy. His current status in M42 proper isn't established. He remains, in the setting's own silence on the matter, someone who hasn't yet re-entered the active narrative. Every Primarch who comes back is another survivor of the project that cost the Custodes their Emperor's future.
Another face from the thing they advised against cycling back into an Imperium they helped break, sustained by an institution that watched it happen and is still managing the consequences. From where the Custodes stand, each resurrection is one more reminder that the failure wasn't clean enough to be final. When Guilliman returned and the Edict of Restraint was amended, the Lexicanum records that the Custodes abandoned their shrouds of shame and were seen again wearing their traditional red garments. They put the red back on. The mourning uniform is gone. The mourning isn't. The throne is deteriorating. The engineering logic of a device never designed for its current function, running for 10 millennia on emergency modifications, does not produce a stable endpoint. The Custodes are closer to that understanding than anyone else in the Imperium. They know what the throne is,
what it was supposed to be, and how long it has been doing what it was never designed to do.
When it stops, they will be there. The Primarchs will be somewhere in the galaxy, managing campaigns, leading crusades, rebuilding the futures their father never got to see. The Custodes will be at the throne. I watched the death of my king's dreams, and then the death of my king. Era of Ruin is where that line finally appeared in print. The 300 companions who told the Emperor not to build the thing that broke. The Prefect who can't name the throne without the weight of what it actually is. The rejection of the sonship claim in the voice of someone who was present for both the promise and the result. The Tribune assigned to protect and watch a Primarch. Because watch is the honest verb for what custodians do when they are standing next to someone who helped put the Emperor where he is. No Games Workshop codex or novel states outright that the Custodes blamed the Primarchs for the heresy. The case here is structural, built from specific scenes, confirmed lines, and the institutional logic those scenes support. But the scenes are on the page now. The contempt is in the text. The qualifier is right there in the name of the machine. The golden throne, such as it is. That is what 10,000 years of managed contempt sounds like when it finally finds language. Not loud, not conspiratorial, professional, cold, and old. The Custodes are the most disciplined faction in the setting, and their discipline is exactly what makes the contempt readable, because discipline is what's holding it in place. The Indomitus Crusade will find out what happens when the throne can no longer be held together by whatever the Custodes have been using to hold it together. The 10,000 will be there. Subscribe for more analysis like this.